Hey, what's going on? I've been told by a lot of people that I ought to listen to a guy called Nick Fuentes. Now, I know of the guy. Haven't watched too much of his stuff. I saw a couple clips here and there on the Hodge twins where he was going off about black people, but a lot of people tell me you got to hear what he's got to say about Jews, and, well, being a Jew myself, I think I'm going to listen to it. So here we go. Let's see what he's got to say.
I saw something today on Twitter which I thought was really interesting. I saw a couple of things that I just want to recap in the context of some of the conversation we've had lately about Trump and about the state of this second term, this administration, and even my situation with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. And I've said this for the past few weeks. It's really interesting how, of course, it goes without saying, everybody seems to be waking up about Israel and the Jews. It's safe to say in a very...
All right, I can see why people are telling me to watch this guy. All right, let's hear him. Go on.
Very broad way that everybody seems to understand that something's up. Something is going on. And maybe people don't know precisely what is happening. And I think that some people are misinformed or ill-informed, and some people are cruel. Some people are taking it too far, and it's taking on a hateful flavor, or maybe too radical or too excessive. But everybody, I think at this point, it goes without saying, there is a general consensus universally that something is going on. Something is up with the Jews and with Israel. And vaguely, the contours of this, again, to the extent that some people are very hateful, some people are not very well informed, some people don't have a very specific idea. There's not a lot of specificity to their conception of what's happening. Everybody recognizes basically that the Jews have a lot of power. They love Israel. And they're using their power over our country to benefit Israel, even though it doesn't necessarily benefit America. That's the gist of it. And that's the big thing that's been going on. And I've said for the past couple of months, there's something else happening, which is maybe equally important. And it's trailing that development. It is trailing behind that development. What do I mean by that? I mean that the realization that Jews love Israel, they have this power, they're using their power to help Israel in a way that isn't beneficial for America, that conversation has become unavoidable. It happened organically, it happened spontaneously. It is so big that it is too big to ignore. It is truly a mass awakening on a subject that was previously taboo. And that taboo was bolstered and maintained by a robust censorship regime.
Kind of still is, but keep going.
For the longest time, people could not talk about this openly or express a particular opinion or viewpoint about it, because to express that viewpoint would get you censored. That the information, that opinion was suppressed. The information about it was suppressed. Anyone that spoke openly and forcefully about it was isolated and punished. And so there were a few different circumstances, or I should say a few different developments that created a circumstance around about 2023 and 2024 that created this spontaneous, organic awakening. And those developments were the October 7th attack and the subsequent Israeli siege of Gaza. And the other is Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, as well as the general liberalization of social media. It seems that the more excessive editorial censorship policies started to get relaxed around that same time that Elon acquired Twitter. So you could say late 2023 throughout 2024. So as these two things happened together, of course, people noticed what was happening in Gaza. They started to speak out about it. And because of the general climate of social media censorship, suddenly, for the first time, they were not being censored. The information, those opinions were not being suppressed, at least not as much as they were before. That's the big development. What has trailed behind that, what has taken place after the fact, in reaction to this, is that there seems to be an appeasement, a calculated appeasement that is taking place. Now, other people don't see it this way. Some people say it's not an appeasement. Some people say there's an awakening of people in the institutions. What am I talking about here? All of a sudden, in 2024, suddenly, very mainstream figures on the right wing started to criticize Israel. This is something that was unheard of. Always, the masses, the throngs of the peasants, were more radical than the institutions. The institutions are the mainstream media, the political parties, the political media like Fox News and the constellation of conservative press, publications, the social platforms, and other elite people in society. So the peasants, the masses, have always been inconveniently racist, prejudiced, nativistic, radical in their politics, at least more so than the institutions, like the Tea Party, like the Trump election in 2016, like the Buchanan brigades, like many different things. The institutions have always acted as gatekeepers. The institutions have always mediated the conversation of the peasants to make sure that it doesn't go too far outside the bounds of what the regime will accept.
Nothing I've heard this far makes me think that this is a crazy person. He seems extremely articulate, very well spoken. He's got like a really long set of fingers on him. I've noticed that, but no, this sounds perfectly reasonable to me. I don't know where all the hate is coming towards this guy from the Jewish community. There seems to be a weird thing where you can't criticize Israel, its government, or anything if you're a Jew. That's just a thing. There's a lot of Jewish people that you can't get into it with them in any way, shape, or form because they're so radically hell-bent on Israel being in the right. And not for nothing, like, obviously a lot of Jewish people are going to have they're going to have some vested interest in Israel for whatever reason. Maybe they got family there. Maybe it's just from their upbringing. As far as I know, I know a couple people from there that don't live there currently. But I'm not really as radical on it. I kind of see it as like, what about America? I get it. Israel's got what they've got going on over there. Those wars between the Muslims and the Jews have been going on for as long as I've been alive. And as far as I can tell, they've gone on for thousands of years. In some way, shape, or form. It's like a hotbed for war. Where I question is, what does America have to do with any of this? Why are we always getting pulled into having whatever goes on over there spill over onto our streets? Why are we taking in refugees? Why are people marching with Palestine flags in our cities? Why are people marching with Israel flags in our cities? I mean, it's the same thing. It's mainly the Palestine flags, though, if we're being honest. And I think we need to sort of decouple Israel from America. You can have we're allies with France, too. Shit's going on in France all the time. We're allies with England, too. A lot of stuff going on over there that we don't hear about. I just don't understand why, with Israel, it seems everybody has to lose their damn minds, and that you're pretty much strictly forbidden to talk about it in any other way other than positively. Let's let them keep going.
They're acting in a gatekeeping capacity, in a moderation capacity. They're controlling that conversation and the limits of what is accepted inside of it and they're trying to be judicious. And as this mass awakening has occurred, the institutions seem to be echoing the sentiments of the people. This is unheard of. You have the people are waking up and criticizing Israel, talking about Jews, and now all of a sudden, on sort of a delayed reaction, lagging behind, trailing just so slightly, are people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, even lately Charlie Kirk, Megyn Kelly, Anna Kasparian, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, among others. People that come from the institutions, the institutional media, the political parties, and so on and so forth. They're starting to sound similar to what the people are saying. And the reason this is remarkable is because the institutions are answerable to Israel and the Jewish oligarchs in a way that the people are not. Fox News is beholden to Rupert Murdoch, who is an ally of Israel. If you want to get any kind of money in the GOP, you need to be pro-Israel, or else AIPAC is going to destroy you. If you want to have any kind of play or access in the conservative Republican politics space at all, you need to be unconditionally, completely pro-Israel.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. AIPAC pretty much owns, like, all of the politicians. I think even on the left, too, they donate an awful lot of money, which means that they're going to have outsized influence. And it seems to me like, you know, go against them at your peril. They'll put you out of politics. Why is that? I mean, that seems like an extraordinary amount of power to wield over politicians in a foreign country, does it not?
Or else you will be destroyed. And so the institutions are sort of lagging behind, and some people are saying, well, the institutional actors, like the peasants, are just getting red-pilled. They're having their own awakening. If your uncle and your parents and your family are getting red-pilled, well, shouldn't we give someone like Tucker or Candace or Megyn Kelly the benefit of the doubt? Maybe they're getting red-pilled too. They had a legitimate good faith awakening. They discovered previously unknown information and changed their minds. I would characterize it and say that they're trying to moderate this conversation too. The mass awakening is so big that it's unavoidable. It has to be talked about. It is concerning a very significant issue. The change in public opinion is drastic. And it's concerning an issue that previously there was very little room for disagreement, for an alternative perspective. And so I think in the context of this awakening, now these institutional actors are coming to the fore. They're not having a good faith epiphany, change of heart. Rather, they are strategically echoing some of the major complaints, echoing some of what can be considered a moderate critique in an effort to mediate this conversation. This is kind of my going theory. And the reason they're doing this, it's not because they all got together and convened a meeting and said, the Goyim are waking up. We need to deploy some kind of counterintelligence operation. I don't think it's so intentional, although maybe it is. I think on some level it reflects an interest on the part of everybody in the system, maybe a competing interest, you might say, where they want to have credibility with their audience. If their audience is going in a direction, they sort of have to follow on some level. So as a broadcaster, as someone of influence, in order to maintain their credibility and their influence, they can't stand athwart all of their audience. They may have to follow the audience somewhat. Here's the other interest. As people with a platform that are part of the institutions, a Megyn Kelly, a Tucker Carlson, they're at Fox News, they're at cable news. They're in a position of great influence. They have connections to the government, to politicians. They have connections to billionaires. They're sort of in a web. They're entangled in a political web in a way that the peasants are not. You, at your regular job, you can have whatever opinion you want. It doesn't have any impact on the country. It doesn't have any impact on governance. But that is not so for a journalist living in D.C. their entire life, who regularly talks to senators and members of the National Security Council and the president himself. So they have sort of this extraordinary interest in stability, a public interest as an institutional figure. And so maybe there's this competing interest that on the one hand, they are hearing their audience, they have some obligation to identify with their audience or echo their audience. Maybe there's a cynical play to maintain credibility. On the other hand, they also have this public interest in stability. They represent an institutional force.
I don't know. This guy doesn't sound like some sort of radical lunatic to me. This whole thing's pretty long, and I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's kind of late. But yeah, I mean that's Nick Fuentes. What do I think of him so far? What I've heard, nothing sounds unreasonable. So that'll do it for you. That'll do it for me. That'll do it for Nick Fuentes tonight. Peace, guys. This is Case from Systemic Cases. I'm out.